All right, so get ready, because today we're diving deep into AI agents. But not just any AI agents. We're talking about ones that can actually see and work with a computer just like a person would.
It's like, yeah, basically Jarvis from Iron Man, but real.
Okay.
We're talking OS
Whoa, it's
Atlas.
Atlas. Okay, you sent me this academic paper on it, and I gotta say it gets pretty technical.
It does, yeah.
But I'm excited to break it down.
Yeah, and I think what's really cool about this is it solves a problem that's been kind of a big issue for AI for a while. AI has been great with text, great with code, but when it comes to actually using our computers, they struggle.
It's like they can understand the words, but not like the actual visual stuff.
Right, exactly. Like, think about how we use computers. We look at the screen, we see the icons, the buttons, and, we click and drag things. Current AI can't really do that well.
So how does OS Atlas change that?
So they use these things called vision and language models, VLMs.
Okay.
And these VLMs, they can actually understand what's on a screen, like from a screenshot.
Hold on. So they're actually like seeing it.
They're seeing it, yeah. They understand the layout, the elements, and even how those elements are connected to each other.
That's wild. But how does it actually use that information? What does it do?
So OS Atlas has these 3 different modes.
Okay.
The first one's called grounding mode. It's basically like a visual search engine for the AI. You can tell it, find the blue button in the bottom right corner, and it'll find it.
Like a visual GPS for AI.
Yeah, exactly. Then there's action mode.
Okay.
This is where OS Atlas figures out what to do to complete a task. Like if you wanted to, say, close a window, it can figure out which button to click to do that.
Even if it's never seen that window before.
Even if it's never seen that specific window before.
That's pretty amazing.
Right. And then the third mode is called agent mode.
Okay.
This is where it gets really specialized.
Okay.
So they can train it to be really good at, say, managing email or booking flights, that sort of thing.
So it's like taking this general AI and making it like an expert in one thing.
Exactly, yeah, a specialist. And the key to all of this is data. They trained OS Atlas on this massive data set of like over 13 million GUI elements.
13 million? What does that even mean?
So that's like buttons, icons, text boxes, menus, everything you see on a screen, from websites to apps to different operating systems, Windows, MacOS, Linux. They basically showed it everything.
Wow. So it's like they gave it this crash course in the entire visual language of computers.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so this is all really impressive. But is there anything that makes OS Atlas different from other AI models that are trying to do similar things? What makes it special?
Well, one of the cool things they did is they created what they call a unified action space.
A unified action space. I need you to
Right, yeah.
explain that one.
Okay, so think about how different platforms use different words for the same actions, right? Like on a desktop, you click a button, but on a phone, you tap it.
Yeah, but it's the same action.
Right, exactly. And that can confuse AI. So what they did with OS Atlas is they created the standard set of actions that works across all platforms.
So it's like they're speaking the same language.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter if you're on a phone or a laptop or even VR, OS Atlas gets it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool. So we know it's unique, but does it actually work? Does it perform well?
So they did a bunch of tests, and actually OS Atlas crushed it. It consistently beat other state-of-the-art AI systems.
Even commercial ones, like the ones from the big tech companies.
Yep, even those. In some tests, it even beat some of the leading commercial VLMs, which is a big deal because, this is all open source.
Wow, that's a real underdog story.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Okay, so this is super cool, but what does it actually mean for, normal people? How could OS Atlas actually change our lives?
Think about all those boring tasks we do on our computers every day, like filling out forms, organizing files, scheduling appointments. Imagine if an AI could do all that for you.
Okay, yeah, that would be amazing. That would free up so much time. But does that mean it's going to replace human jobs?
That's a good question, and it's something we definitely need to think about. But if you look at history, new technologies don't always eliminate jobs. They often create new ones that we couldn't even imagine before.
So it's more about augmenting our abilities, working with AI instead of being replaced by it.
Exactly. Like calculators didn't replace mathematicians, they just freed them up to do more complex work. And that's what AI agents like OS Atlas can do for us. They can handle the boring stuff so we can focus on the things that require, human creativity and thinking.
Okay, I like that. So it's not man versus machine, it's man with machine.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the potential here.
Yeah.
But before we go any further, I want to understand a little more about how it actually works. How do you teach an AI to understand something as complex as a graphical user interface?
Yeah, that's a great question. It gets to the heart of what makes this research so innovative. Like, they use some really clever techniques to train these VLMs, and, well, the results speak for themselves, right?
Definitely. So let's unpack that a little bit. How did they do it?
So the training involves two main phases.
Okay.
The first one is called GUI grounding pre-training.
GUI grounding pre-training.
Yeah. Basically, they show the AI millions of screenshots, and each screenshot is paired with a description of what's on the screen.
Okay, so it's like they're saying, this is a button, this is a menu, that kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. And the more examples the AI sees, the better it gets at understanding what those things look like and where they usually are on a screen.
So it's like it's building up a visual vocabulary.
Yeah, exactly. And then comes the second phase, which is called action fine-tuning.
Action fine-tuning, okay.
Yeah, so this is where they start giving the AI specific instructions, like click this button or type this text into that box.
Okay, and the AI has to actually do it.
Yeah, and it has to do it on all sorts of different platforms.
So it's not just learning how to click a button, it's learning, like, the whole context of what that click means.
Right, exactly.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Okay.
But I'm curious about something you mentioned earlier, that they had limited data for certain platforms, like for desktop computers.
Yeah,
Did that affect how well OS Atlas could perform those tasks?
that's a really good question. And it's actually pretty amazing, but even with limited data for desktop stuff, OS Atlas still did really well.
So even though it hadn't seen as many examples of, like, Windows or macOS interfaces,
Yeah.
it could still figure out how to use them.
Right, because it had learned these general principles of how graphical interfaces work.
I see.
Yeah, and this is where their data infrastructure for grounding data synthesis comes in.
Grounding data synthesis. That sounds complicated.
It's actually pretty simple. They came up with a way to create new training data for any platform by basically simulating how a human would use it. So even if they don't have a lot of real-world examples for, say, a specific type of Linux, they can still create realistic data that helps OS Atlas learn.
So it's like having a virtual user that can test out all these different interfaces.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really clever.
It is, yeah. And it means that the more data they feed it, the better OS Atlas will get over time.
Okay, so this is all really incredible, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Like, how do they actually measure how well OS Atlas performs on these tasks? And what are some of the challenges they faced?
Those are great questions, and those are exactly what we're going to get into next. So
Mhm.
how did they, really put OS Atlas to the test? They designed these experiments to see how well it could handle different situations. One of the big ones was testing its zero-shot ode capabilities.
Zero-shot ode. What's that?
So it's all about how well it can adapt, right?
Okay.
OD stands for out of distribution, which basically means using it for things it hasn't specifically been trained to do.
Like throwing it a curveball and seeing if it can hit it.
Exactly, yeah. And zero shot means it has to do this without any examples or training, like right then and there.
So they're really making it think on its feet.
They are, and the results are pretty impressive.
Okay.
They tested it on 6 different benchmark data sets for like mobile apps, websites, and even those desktop environments.
Which is, remember, where they had less training data.
Exactly, yeah. So they were really trying to push its limits, right?
Hmm.
And get the OS Atlas didn't just do okay, it actually outperformed this commercial VLM called GPT-4o in a lot of these zero-shot OD tests.
Wait, it beat a commercial VLM?
It did. And remember, OS Atlas is open source.
That's a big deal.
It is.
So what kind of, like, specific tasks were they testing?
So they had it like navigate through a mobile apps menu, fill out forms on websites, even control apps on a simulated desktop.
Wow. And it could do all of this without any training on those specific apps or tasks.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like it had learned these basic principles about how interfaces are designed, how people use them, so it could apply that to these new situations.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's be real. There's got to be some limitations, right? Like, were there things that OS Atlas struggled with?
Of course, yeah. No system's perfect.
Okay.
One thing they mentioned is that we need better ways to measure how well AI performs, Not just whether it gets the right answer, but like how it gets there.
Like, it needs to show its work, like in math class.
Yeah, exactly. Transparency is super important, especially as AI becomes more, part of our lives.
Definitely. Okay, so the results are great. But, like, big picture, what does all this mean? How will this tech actually affect our lives?
I mean, imagine if all those tasks that take up our time, scheduling things, booking trips, even managing money, imagine if AI could just do all that for us.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah.
But what about, like, the more creative stuff, the things that require human intuition, judgment? Can AI do that too?
That's where it gets really interesting. As these agents get better, they could help us with things like writing, design, maybe even scientific research. Imagine having an AI partner that helps you brainstorm ideas, explore new things.
Like a super-powered research assistant?
Yeah,
'Cause
basically.
that would be amazing. But I gotta ask, could this lead to, like, people losing jobs?
That's a valid question, and we definitely need to talk about it.
Yeah.
But historically, new tech creates new opportunities too.
So it's more about augmenting our abilities, working with AI, not being replaced?
Exactly, yeah. Like when calculators were invented, mathematicians didn't disappear. They could focus on harder problems.
Right.
And I think that's what AI agents like OS Atlas can do for us too,
Yeah.
Free us up to focus on those uniquely human skills and things.
Okay, so it's not about man versus machine, it's man with machine.
Right.
And, one thing that's really cool is that OS Atlas is open source, right?
It is.
What does that mean for, like, the future of AI?
That's actually one of the most exciting parts of this whole thing.
Oh.
Making it open source makes this cutting-edge AI research available to everyone. So individuals, smaller companies, researchers from anywhere, they can all contribute to it, build on it.
It's like it's not just limited to these big tech companies anymore.
Right.
It's a team effort.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's also really important for, those ethical concerns people have about AI. When everyone can see the code, it's easier to spot potential problems, biases, things like that.
So it's not just about access, it's about making sure that this powerful tech is used responsibly.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I think by, encouraging this kind of open collaboration in the AI community, we can make sure it's used for good for everyone.
That's a great point. Okay, so we've talked about OS Atlas being able to use our computers, right?
Yeah.
But could this tech eventually be used for, like, the physical world too? Like, could we have AI that can navigate our homes or use tools or even help us with physical tasks?
That's a really cool thought. While OS Atlas is focused on computers right now, yeah, I think those same ideas could be used for robots and other physical systems too. Like, imagine AI that can understand and work with the world around us, just like it does with a computer screen.
It's like taking that Jarvis from Iron Man idea and, like, making it real in the physical world.
Right. The possibilities are huge. But okay, let's focus back on OS Atlas and computers for now. We've covered a lot, but what's next for it? What's the future of AI agents like this?
So where do we go from here? What's the next step for, like, OS Atlas?
Well, they actually talk about that in the paper.
Okay.
One thing they say is we need even bigger data sets, even more data to train these AI agents.
Wait, even more than that 13 million GUI elements they already used?
Yeah, it sounds like a lot, but as these AI agents like OS Atlas get better and better, they need to see more, more types of interfaces, more ways that people use them.
Yeah, the digital world's always changing, right? Like new apps, new websites all the time.
Exactly. And as we have more and more devices like smart homes and even self-driving cars with graphical interfaces, AI needs to be able to keep up, right?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so more data. But what about, like, OS Atlas itself? What are they going to do to, like, improve the actual system?
Well, one thing they're looking at is making the training process more efficient.
Okay.
Right now, it takes a ton of computing power to train these VLMs, and that's expensive, takes a lot of time.
So they're trying to make it faster and cheaper to, like, train these AIs.
Yeah, exactly. They also want to make OS Atlas even better at adapting to new interfaces, those ones that haven't seen before.
Like, make it even better at those zero-shot tasks.
Exactly. So it can handle even more situations and get even more accurate.
That's wild. It makes me think about all the things we could do with this. Like, we talked about automating everyday stuff, but could OS Atlas also help make technology more accessible for, say, people with disabilities?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the most exciting possibilities here. Imagine if people who have difficulty using a mouse or keyboard could control their computers with their voice or even just their thoughts, right?
Wow, yeah, that would be incredible.
It would open up so many doors for people. And it's not just about accessibility. OS Atlas could also change how we learn, AI tutors that can tailor lessons to each student, or AI assistants that can help scientists make breakthroughs.
That's really cool. This all sounds amazing, but, we got to talk about the other side of this too. Anytime we talk about, like, really powerful AI people worry about jobs, right? And like, what if it gets used for the wrong reasons?
Yeah, definitely. Those are important things to think about. But, technology is just a tool. It depends on how we use it.
Right, like a hammer can build a house, or it can,
Exactly. And I think if we're open about it, if we work together and really think about the ethics of AI as we develop it, then we can make sure it's used for good, that it benefits everyone.
I love that. So it's not just about the tech, it's about the people behind it.
Exactly.
That's a great point. And, going back to something you mentioned earlier, the fact that OS Atlas is open source, I think that really helps with that, right? Like making
Yeah.
sure it's used ethically.
Absolutely. Open source means anyone can see the code, anyone can contribute. So it's not just controlled by a few big companies. It's a global effort.
So it's more democratic, more transparent.
Exactly. And that means more innovation, more ideas, and more people keeping an eye out to make sure it's used responsibly.
That's really cool. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up our deep dive into OS Atlas. Thanks so much for walking me through all of this. It's been fascinating.
My pleasure. And to our listener, what would you do with an AI agent like OS Atlas? What tasks would you have it automate? What problems would you have it solve? Think about it. The possibilities are really endless.